At the National Museum of American History, and I've just arrayed a number of objects from our inaugural collection, which goes back to George Washington all the way to the present. And actually this weekend we'll be out collecting additional material to add to this collection. You know, inaugurations are these wonderful events. I think in many respects they're like great American holidays. Just like Thanksgiving or the 4th of July, they really are part of an American tradition, an important one, in which we celebrate, you know, American democracy, which is certainly one of our great contributions to the world and to all of our lives. And so that's what this material is. And what we try to do is both document the individual inaugurations, but the whole part of it, not just the official part, but the parts in which everyday people participate as well. Inaugurations serve a very simple function. On one hand, within the Constitution, there was this requirement that every president had to take the oath of office. And this was an oath not only to serve in this office, but also to protect the Constitution. And it's that part of it, that they're part of this branch, they are a branch of government to preserve this form of government. There's something very reassuring about this notion that every 4 years, whether it's your candidate or your opponent, that they're going to be gone after a certain length of time. And it's that celebration of the in and out of the presidency that makes it so important. We can date our collection back to these little brass buttons that were made for George Washington's first inauguration in New York City. And you can see they're just a simple brass disc, often with the letters GW on it, a little shank on the back. You could either pin it to your clothes or sew it on. It demonstrates to us this relationship between the presidency and the citizenry, which is really the key, and that's really what inaugurations are a part of. And they're these wonderful smash-ups. You know, they're part coronation and they're part celebrations of American democracy. You know, it's a citizen from the people that's assuming this office and then leaving the office. And that relationship is really key. They're also celebrations of national unity, and there's a little bit of this partisan gloating. One of our great treasures is this flag from Thomas Jefferson's first inauguration. That's 1800. And you can see in looking at this banner that what it says, the eagle holds these ribbons, and on one ribbon it says T. Jefferson, President of the United States, and on the other, faintly written, is John Adams is no more. You know, this sort of celebration of the process, the in and out. And so that's what we're looking for, is really the relationship of this event to the larger nation and our history. And in some ways you can look at these inaugurations as little touchstones along our national narrative of the changes that have taken place. Some of them are technological. Sometimes, you know, it's a question of, you know, George Washington riding in a carriage, someone else riding in a car, the introduction of radio and then television and the internet to record these things. There's little steps along the way that you can record, but there's also a kind of continuity, a reassuring continuity, which is true, I think, of a lot of holidays. You know that Thanksgiving in your household is like this. We serve our mashed potatoes this way. We serve our inaugurations that way. There's very much the same kind of spirit. I've just pulled a few sort of simple things to just give you a sense of the taste and feel of inaugurations. You know, one of the aspects of inaugurations, really from the very beginning, is the inaugural ball. These are celebrations in which this candidate, now president, is introduced to the public, as well as celebrations of everybody coming together. It's a way of, you know, recognizing your supporters, Often in the early days, it was a way of introducing this politician to the diplomatic corps in Washington. And so here's just a sense. Here's an inaugural invitation for Polk's inauguration in 1845. This happens to be for the $10 ball. Polk had two inaugurations, or two inaugural balls. One was the $10 ball for the Washington elite, and then there was the $2 ball for the everyday citizen, the supporters of Polk. There was a problem in that one, in that they confused the invitations. And the diplomatic corps got the invitations to the $2 ball and not the $10. And all the newspapers the next day recorded that there were the diplomats' wives dancing with their gardeners. So, common story. And we collect this kind of material. This happens to be an invitation for Abraham Lincoln's second inauguration, for his inaugural ball, as a way of sort of documenting that formal sense. But there's a quality of these inaugurations that are very important, because the tone is very carefully constructed often. Sometimes you lose control, such as with Polk, but oftentimes everyone knows that every little aspect of an inauguration is going to be examined for what is its meaning, what is being said, what are the undercurrents. Do you ride up to the Capitol in a carriage in splendor? Do you walk back as a man of the people, as Jimmy Carter did? There's really careful balance. And when you look at some of this material, you can see over time that, in fact, they're carefully crafting it as well. I've always been amazed in looking at Jimmy Carter's inaugural material, how informal his material tends to be compared to other presidents. And it's clearly a statement that following the Nixon years, the imperial presidency, they were then to have a presidency of the people. You notice on his tickets to these grand events, rather than having an inaugural ball, he has an inaugural party. Very clear statement of what's being sort of projected a long time. And then you can come back to Ronald Reagan, and lo and behold, no surprise, there's a rejection of the Jimmy Carter years, and you have very formal gold tickets to inaugural balls, and clearly it is an inaugural ball. The program that seems very sort of informal for his becomes very formal just a few years later. I think this stuff says something about not only those administrations and what they're trying to conceive and try to produce during those events. It also says something about all of us as well. It says something about the nation, its feelings, what it was looking for, because they're certainly trying to play off of that as well. And part of the material that we collect is just about the enthusiasm. You know, inaugurations are meant to be days of national celebration and national unity. They're not obviously always that way, but so this kind of souvenirs that people make, create, just as in the days of George Washington, you know, here are these brass buttons, here are these little pennants that people could then buy from the various vendors on the street and then take home. I particularly like this. This is a little glass tray sold on that day. It's to mimic a card that says Mr. and Mrs. John F. Kennedy announces a change of address to 1600 Pennsylvania Avenue. And then it has at home, January 20, 1961. You know, a lot of this stuff is made with a little sense of humor, a little enthusiasm, a little exuberance, and that's really what we're trying to capture in this collection. So, you know, the idea that people actually get license plates, these are good for a day or maybe for a week, you can put them on your car, you're part of the celebration. go to the parade. This happens to be from the Kennedy 61. You can sort of watch the crowd up above for those of us who are a little shorter. We see these kinds of continuity, this ongoing, both the material and this expression of exuberance in a lot of the material. So like Kennedy, 50 years later, here is one for the Obama parade. And you could see it in the individual things that people make. My colleague was standing in the crowd next to a woman wearing this hat at the last inauguration. And I think it just bespeaks the kind of enthusiasm that we all witnessed on the Mall in 2009. People came full of support, full of excitement, full of enthusiasm, wanting to be part of this larger experience. And I think that's what, in part, inaugurations are all about.
Throughout inauguration.